I am Ashley, 32 years old, and I still remember the sting of betrayal at our annual Walker family reunion at Grandma Eleanor's estate last summer. When I spotted "snack thief" scribbled on my name tag in my brother Michael's handwriting, my mother Deborah just laughed dismissively. What hurt most wasn't the childish prank, but how it echoed years of being overlooked despite silently paying thousands toward Michael's medical bills every month. No one knew. No one cared to know. Before I continue the story, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, hit that like button, and subscribe if family drama makes you feel less alone in your own struggles. The annual Walker family reunion had been a tradition since before I was born. Every summer, without fail, the entire extended family would gather at Grandma Eleanor's sprawling estate in Connecticut, a beautiful colonial home with 6 bedrooms and a garden that bloomed with hydrangeas and roses. The preparations would begin weeks in advance, with endless family group texts about who would bring what dish and which cousins would be flying in from which states. This year, I approached the reunion with renewed optimism. After 15 years of feeling like I was performing on a stage where the spotlight always managed to miss me, I thought things might finally be different. I had just been promoted to senior financial advisor at my firm in Boston, managing portfolios worth millions of dollars. I had purchased my first home, a charming brownstone that I had meticulously renovated. Surely, this would be the year my family would see me for who I was rather than as Michael's overlooked sister. Michael, my brother, 3 years younger at 29, had always been the golden child of the family. When we were growing up, his artwork was prominently displayed on the refrigerator while mine was tucked away in drawers. His baseball trophies lined the mantel while my debate team medals were stored in a box in the attic. My mother Deborah, a high school English teacher with a penchant for dramatic sighs and backhanded compliments, never missed his games but regularly had too many papers to grade during my competitions. My father Robert wasn't much better. A quiet accountant who preferred to avoid conflict. He would shrug and say, "That's just how your mother is," whenever I expressed hurt at being overlooked. He died from a heart attack 5 years ago. And sometimes I wondered if he ever really saw me at all. Aunt Barbara, my mother's sister, was cut from the same cloth. At family gatherings, she would fawn over Michael's latest accomplishments while asking me perfunctory questions about that money job of mine. She never remembered if I was an accountant, financial advisor, or bank teller, despite my explaining it every single time. I spent $300 on a bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon for the reunion, knowing my mother appreciated fine wine. I also baked my grandmother's secret recipe apple pie, the one she had passed down to me during one rare moment of connection when I was 16. The pie took 6 hours to perfect, from making the dough from scratch to arranging the lattice top with precision. As I drove up the winding driveway to Grandma Eleanor's house, the gravel crunching under my tires, I felt a familiar mixture of hope and anxiety. The house looked the same as always, white with black shutters and a wraparound porch dotted with rocking chairs. Cars were already parked haphazardly on the lawn, a sign that I was, as usual, not the first to arrive despite leaving Boston at dawn. Balancing the wine and pie, I made my way to the front door, which stood open to let in the summer breeze. Voices and laughter spilled out, the sounds of a family already deep in celebration without me. Still, I plastered on a smile and stepped inside. "Ashley, you made it." My cousin Jessica, one of the few family members who seemed genuinely happy to see me, rushed forward to help with my packages. Jessica was 34. A pediatric nurse with kind eyes and an even kinder heart. "Let me take that before you drop it. Is this Grandma's apple pie? You're the only one who can make it right." Before I could answer, my mother appeared in the hallway, glass of white wine already in hand despite it being barely noon. "Ashley, finally. Everyone else has been here for hours. Michael drove in from Chicago last night, so he could help set up." No acknowledgement of my 5-hour drive that morning, or the fact that I had brought the wine and dessert she had specifically requested. Still, I leaned in to kiss her cheek. "Hi, Mom." The traffic was worse than I expected. "Well, you're here now." The name tags are on the sideboard in the dining room. Everyone else has theirs already. And just like that, she turned away to greet my Uncle Paul, who had just arrived behind me. Her voice instantly warming as she exclaimed over how well he looked and how long it had been since they'd seen each other. 3 months, to be exact, at Easter dinner at my mother's house, which I had also attended. Uncle Paul hadn't remembered my name and had called me Michael's sister all evening. Jessica gave me a sympathetic look. Come on. I'll show you where to put your stuff. I saved you a spot in the blue bedroom upstairs, away from Aunt Barbara's snoring. As we climbed the stairs, I felt the familiar weight of disappointment settling in my chest. But I shook it off. This year would be different. This year, I would make them see me. After settling into the blue bedroom, I headed downstairs to join the reunion festivities. The dining room was buzzing with activity as family members mingled, catching up on the past year's events. I made my way to the sideboard where a collection of name tags lay scattered. My fingers rifled through them until I found one with my name on it. That's when I saw it. Under Ashley Walker. Someone had written "Snack Thief" in blue marker. The handwriting was unmistakable. The same slightly slanted script that had labeled my belongings as not Michael's throughout our childhood when he wanted to make sure he didn't accidentally use my things. I stared at the name tag, feeling a familiar knot form in my stomach. It was such a small thing, really. A silly joke. But it stung because it unearthed memories of family dinners where my mother would watch me take seconds with raised eyebrows, commenting on how growing girls need to be careful while encouraging Michael to eat up. You're a growing boy. Found your tag, I see. My mother's voice came from behind me, tinged with amusement. She stood with my brother, both of them watching me with matching smirks. I held up the tag. Very funny, Michael. Real mature. Michael, with his perfect teeth and our father's blue eyes, shrugged innocently. Just keeping it real, sis. Remember when you used to steal cookies from Grandma's jar and blame it on me? That was 20 years ago. And I was 12. Well, old habits die hard, my mother said, laughing. Put it on, Ashley. It's all in good fun. Several family members had gathered around now, drawn by the conversation. Aunt Barbara peered at the name tag and chuckled. Well, it's true, isn't it? Remember how she used to clean out the refrigerator after school? We could barely keep food in the house. The group laughed, and I felt my cheeks flush with embarrassment. It wasn't true at all. I had been a normal child with a normal appetite. But in my family's revisionist history, I was always the one with flaws while Michael was perfection personified. I pinned the name tag to my blouse, forcing a smile. I contribute every month, I began, wanting to remind them that I was the one who had been silently transferring $3,000 to my mother's account every month for the past 3 years to help with Michael's medical bills after his accident. But my mother cut me off sharply. Shut up. Don't steal your brother's achievements, she hissed, her smile never faltering for the benefit of the extended family, but her eyes flashing a warning. I stood there confused. What achievements? The money was mine, earned through long hours and hard work at the firm. Michael had been between jobs when he got injured, and his insurance had barely covered half of his expenses. I had stepped in without being asked, setting up the automatic transfer to help ease the burden on my mother, who was still adjusting to life without my father. The confusion must have shown on my face because my mother gripped my elbow and steered me toward the kitchen, away from curious ears. Michael has been telling everyone how he's been supporting the family since your father died, she whispered fiercely. It gives him dignity after the accident took so much from him. Don't you dare contradict him. But that's my money, I protested, keeping my voice low. $3,000 every month for 3 years. That's over $100,000, Mom. And we're very grateful, she said dismissively. But Michael needs this. His self-esteem is tied to being the provider now. You have your fancy job and your fancy house. Let him have this. Before I could argue further, she patted my cheek in a gesture that felt more condescending than affectionate and returned to the party, leaving me alone in the kitchen with the realization that my financial support had not only gone unacknowledged, but had actually been attributed to my brother. As I stood there, memories flooded back. The Christmas when my carefully selected gift for my mother, a rare first edition of her favorite novel that had taken months to track down, was somehow presented as being from both Michael and me, though he had contributed nothing. The time in high school when my research for a family history project was submitted by Michael for his own assignment, earning him an A while I had to scramble to create new material. The pattern was clear, but I had never wanted to see it. I needed a moment to compose myself. I slipped away to the downstairs bathroom, locking the door behind me. Staring at my reflection in the mirror, I saw the snack thief name tag and felt a wave of anger and hurt wash over me. I removed the tag and shoved it into my pocket. A soft knock on the door interrupted my thoughts. "Ashley? Are you okay?" It was Jessica. I opened the door to find her standing there with concern etched on her face. She slipped inside and locked the door again. "I saw what happened," she said quietly. "That was really messed up. Apparently Michael has been taking credit for my financial contributions," I said, still struggling to process it. Jessica wasn't surprised. "I figured something was up. Michael's been talking about how he's taking care of Mom since Uncle Robert died, but I know he was unemployed for a long time after his accident." She hesitated, then added, "There's more. I overheard Aunt Barbara telling Cousin Rachel that Michael's been paying for Grandma Eleanor's new roof and medication." My jaw dropped. I paid for that roof. $35,000 last winter when it started leaking. And I set up the prescription delivery service for Grandma and put it on my credit card. Jessica squeezed my arm sympathetically. "I'm sorry, Ashley. I don't know why they let him get away with it." I didn't know either, but the bathroom was not the place to figure it out. Taking a deep breath, I straightened my blouse and plastered on a smile. We should get back before they send a search party. Or more likely, don't notice we're missing at all. Jessica linked her arm through mine. "For what it's worth, I notice you, Ashley. And so does Grandma Eleanor." It wasn't much, but in that moment, it was enough to help me face the rest of the family again. The remainder of the afternoon passed in a blur of awkward conversations and forced smiles. I avoided my mother and Michael as much as possible, instead focusing on catching up with distant cousins who knew little about my life and therefore had no preconceived narratives to impose on me. But even these interactions were tainted by the knowledge that somewhere in the house, my brother was likely telling stories about his generosity and financial support of the family. Stories built on my silent sacrifices. At 6 o'clock, the dinner bell rang, a tradition Grandma Eleanor maintained from her own childhood. The family migrated to the dining room where 2 long tables had been set up to accommodate everyone. Assigned seating, another tradition, placed me between Uncle Paul's wife Linda, who had met me only twice before and kept calling me Angela, and a second cousin whose name I couldn't recall, but who spent the entire meal talking about his recent divorce. From my position near the end of the table, I could see my mother, Michael, Aunt Barbara, and Grandma Eleanor seated at the center, the place of honor. Michael was animatedly telling a story that had them all laughing, his hands gesturing expressively as he commanded their attention. The catered meal was served family-style, platters of roast beef, herb-roasted potatoes, and green beans passed around the tables. When the food reached me, several dishes were already nearly empty, leaving me with smaller portions than I would have liked. No one seemed to notice or care. As the main course wound down, my mother stood and tapped her glass with a spoon. The room fell silent. "I'd like to propose a toast," she announced, her voice carrying across the dining room. "To my selfless son, Michael, who has been the backbone of this family since we lost Robert." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Michael, your generosity and support have meant everything to me and to your grandmother. The way you've stepped up to take care of us financially while dealing with your own recovery is nothing short of heroic." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Michael ducked his head in false modesty, a small smile playing at his lips. "To Michael," Aunt Barbara added, raising her glass, "the provider and protector of the Walker family." "To Michael," echoed around the room as glasses were raised. I lifted mine mechanically, the words sticking in my throat. The $3,000 that had left my account just last week apparently meant nothing. The new roof over Grandma's head that I had paid for was now Michael's achievement. The prescriptions that allowed Grandma to manage her heart condition, also my contribution, were now evidence of Michael's devotion. Memories surfaced of similar scenes throughout my life. My high school graduation, where my parents had spent most of the ceremony talking about how Michael would graduate in 3 years. My college acceptance to Princeton, overshadowed by Michael making the varsity baseball team. My first job offer at a prestigious financial firm, barely acknowledged during a dinner celebrating Michael's B+ on a physics test. After dinner, the family gathered in the living room for the traditional photo session. Cousin Timothy, a professional photographer, set up his equipment while we arranged ourselves according to my mother's direction. "Michael, you stand next to Mom in the center," she instructed. "Barbara and Eleanor on either side. Then the rest of you fill in around." I found myself positioned at the far edge of the group, so far to the side that Timothy had to ask everyone to squeeze closer together so I wouldn't be cut out of the frame entirely. As we held our smiles for the camera, I couldn't help but feel that my position in the photo perfectly symbolized my position in the family, always on the periphery, barely included. While Timothy was reviewing the photos, I slipped away to get some air on the back porch. Through the open window, I could hear my mother and Aunt Barbara talking in the kitchen. "Ashley seems to be doing well enough with that job of hers," Aunt Barbara was saying, her tone suggesting that well enough was barely adequate. "I suppose," my mother replied, "though I worry about her priorities. All she cares about is money and her career. Not like Michael, who understands the importance of family." I froze, the injustice of her words hitting me like a physical blow. Not only was I supporting the family financially, but I had been the one to call my mother every Sunday without fail since my father died. I had been the one to drive up from Boston whenever Grandma Eleanor needed help around the house. I had been the one to remember birthdays and anniversaries with thoughtful gifts and cards. "Well, she always was the selfish one," Aunt Barbara agreed. "Remember how she used to hog the bathroom in the mornings? Some things never change." Their laughter drifted through the window, cutting deeper than they could know. I retreated to the far end of the porch, sinking into an old wicker chair. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the lawn where cousins were setting up a game of twilight croquet. No one had thought to invite me. Later that evening, while most of the family was engaged in a rowdy card game in the living room, I wandered into the study, seeking a moment of quiet. The room had been my grandfather's domain before he passed, and it still held his collection of leather-bound books and nautical instruments from his days in the Merchant Marine. A photo album lay open on the desk, and curiosity drew me closer. It was filled with family photos, carefully labeled in my grandmother's elegant handwriting. What caught my eye were the separate pages dedicated to Michael's achievements. Baseball trophies, science fair ribbons, his high school and college graduation photos, all meticulously documented. I flipped through the album, looking for a similar section for me. There was none. In fact, there were surprisingly few photos of me at all, mostly group shots where I stood at the edge, just as I had today. My Princeton graduation, my professional certification, my first home. None of these milestones had been deemed worthy of inclusion. Finding anything interesting, I turned to find Aunt Barbara standing in the doorway, watching me with a guarded expression. "Just looking at family photos," I said, closing the album. "I noticed there's quite a collection of Michael's accomplishments." "Your mother keeps those updated," she said, moving into the room. "She's very proud of him." "And what about me?" I couldn't stop myself from asking. "Is she proud of me too?" Aunt Barbara sighed, settling into a leather armchair. "Ashley, you have to understand. Michael has always needed more support, more encouragement. You were always so independent, so self-sufficient. You didn't need the praise like he did. Everyone needs recognition, Aunt Barbara. Everyone needs to feel valued. But you've done well for yourself, haven't you? Good job, nice house. You managed just fine without constant validation." "That's not the point," I said, frustration building. "The point is that my contributions to this family go completely unacknowledged. Do you even know that I'm the one who's been paying Michael's medical bills? That I paid for Grandma's new roof?" Aunt Barbara had the grace to look uncomfortable. Michael mentioned he was handling those things. With my money. Money that I earned and gave to help the family. Money that he's taking credit for. Well, she said, shifting in her seat. Perhaps he's the one distributing it. Managing the payments and such. He's not. The money goes directly from my account to Mom's. She's the one who pays the bills. Then I'm sure there's some misunderstanding. Her tone turned defensive. In any case, Michael has been through so much with his accident. If taking a little credit helps his self-esteem, is that really so terrible? You have plenty to be proud of in your life. Can't you let him have this? I stared at her, incredulous. Let him have this? Let him take credit for over $100,000 of my money? For my hard work and sacrifice? Don't be so dramatic, Ashley. It's just money. Family is what matters. And in this family, we support each other without keeping score. She stood, straightening her cardigan. You might want to think about that before you make a scene and upset your mother and grandmother. With that, she left the room, leaving me with the distinct impression that in the Walker family, supporting each other meant that I should give silently while Michael received the praise. The invisibility I had felt my entire life wasn't accidental, it was by design. The following day, tensions simmered beneath the surface of family activities. I participated in the annual croquet tournament, helped set up the buffet lunch, and engaged in small talk with relatives I saw only at these gatherings, all while avoiding direct interaction with my mother and Michael. The snack thief name tag remained crumpled in my pocket, a tangible reminder of my position in the family hierarchy. As evening approached, it was time for dessert. I retrieved my apple pie from the refrigerator, the lattice top golden and perfect, the filling of thinly sliced Honeycrisp apples, brown sugar, cinnamon, and a hint of nutmeg, creating an aroma that drew appreciative sniffs from those nearby. That smells wonderful, Ashley, Grandma Eleanor said. The first genuine compliment I'd received since arriving. Is that my recipe? Yes, exactly the way you taught me, I replied, carefully placing the pie on the dessert table next to various store-bought offerings from other family members. Just as I was about to cut the first slice, Michael burst into the dining room carrying a plastic container. Look what I brought, he announced loudly. Chocolate chip cookies from Palmer's Bakery. The reaction was immediate and enthusiastic. Michael, you remembered, my mother exclaimed. Palmer's has the best cookies in the state. They're all the way across town. Aunt Barbara added. You must have gone out of your way to get those. Michael grinned, basking in the attention. Nothing's too much trouble for my family. The crowd around the dessert table shifted, gravitating toward Michael and his cookies, leaving me standing alone with my homemade pie. Only Jessica and Grandma Eleanor remained, exchanging a look I couldn't quite interpret. I'll have some of your pie, Ashley, Grandma said, holding out her plate. Michael knows I can't eat chocolate because of my diabetes. I cut her a generous slice, fighting back the hurt that threatened to overwhelm me. It was just dessert, I told myself. Just cookies versus pie. It didn't mean anything. But as I watched my mother make a show of savoring Michael's store-bought cookies, exclaiming over how thoughtful he was to remember her favorite bakery, something inside me began to crack. The accumulated weight of a lifetime of such moments pressed down, making it hard to breathe. Jessica nudged me gently. Come with me, she whispered. I want to show you something. Grateful for the excuse to leave the dessert table, I followed her upstairs to the guest room she was staying in. She closed the door behind us and pulled a leather-bound book from her overnight bag. I found this in the attic yesterday while looking for extra blankets, she explained, handing it to me. I think you should see it. The book was heavy, its cover worn with age. I opened it to find a family financial ledger, meticulously maintained in what I recognized as my mother's handwriting. Flipping through the pages, I saw records of household expenses, medical bills, home repairs, and contributions from family members stretching back 5 years. And there it was, in black and white. Every monthly transfer from my account was recorded, but in the column labeled Source, my mother had written Michael, via Ashley's account. The roof repair, the prescription service. Even birthday gifts I had given directly to Grandma Eleanor were all attributed to Michael. I don't understand, I said, my voice barely audible. Why would she document it this way? She knows the money comes from me. Jessica sat beside me on the bed. I think Aunt Deborah has convinced herself that this is Michael's money, that he's somehow the one generating it, and you're just the conduit. But that's insane, I protested. He knows it's my money. She knows it's my money. I'm not saying it's right, Jessica said carefully. But after Uncle Robert died and then Michael's accident, I think Aunt Deborah needed to believe that she still had a man taking care of her. It was easier to see Michael in that role than to admit that her daughter was the one supporting the family. The ledger trembled in my hands as the full extent of the deception became clear. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a simple case of giving Michael credit to boost his ego. This was a deliberate erasure of my contributions. A rewriting of reality to fit a narrative where Michael was the hero and I was, at best, an afterthought. I need to talk to my mother, I said, standing abruptly. Jessica looked alarmed. Are you sure that's a good idea right now? Everyone's still downstairs for dessert. Good. Then they can all hear the truth for once. With the ledger clutched to my chest, I marched downstairs, a strange calm settling over me. I found the family still gathered in the dining room, plates of cookies and other desserts in hand as they chatted in small groups. I walked directly to where my mother stood with Michael and Aunt Barbara. Without preamble, I placed the ledger on the table in front of them. I found this, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. Would anyone like to explain why every dollar I've contributed to this family has been credited to Michael? The conversation around us died as people turned to watch the unfolding drama. My mother's face drained of color as she stared at the open ledger. Where did you get that? She demanded, making no move to touch the book. It doesn't matter where I got it. What matters is what's in it. $3,000 every month for 3 years, Mom. My money. The roof on Grandma's house. My money. The prescription service. My money. I turned to Michael. Did you know about this? Did you know you were taking credit for my financial support? Michael had the decency to look uncomfortable. Mom said it would be better if the family thought I was helping out, he admitted. That it would seem weird if my little sister was supporting everyone. Weird? It's weird to acknowledge that I've been helping the family? That I've given over $100,000 without asking for anything in return, not even recognition. Ashley, you're making a scene, my mother hissed. This is neither the time nor the place. When is the time, Mom? When would you have told everyone the truth? Or were you planning to keep pretending that Michael is the family provider indefinitely? You don't understand, she said, her voice dropping to an urgent whisper. Michael needs this. After his accident, losing his job, his girlfriend leaving him, his self-worth was destroyed. Knowing he could still take care of his family was the only thing keeping him going. I stared at her, the pieces finally clicking into place. What are you talking about? Michael was in a car accident. He broke his leg and had a concussion. He was back at work within 3 months. A strange silence fell over the room. My mother and Michael exchanged a look I couldn't decipher. Tell her, Grandma Eleanor said from behind me, her voice gentle but firm. She deserves to know the truth, Deborah. My mother sighed, shoulders slumping in defeat. It wasn't just a broken leg and a concussion, Ashley. Michael has a traumatic brain injury. The cognitive effects aren't always visible, but they're significant enough that he hasn't been able to hold a steady job since the accident. The monthly medical bills aren't just for physical therapy, they're for neuropsychological treatment, cognitive rehabilitation, and medications. I turned to Michael, seeing him with new eyes. Why didn't you tell me? Because you already had so much on your plate after Dad died, he said, not meeting my gaze. You were taking care of Mom, taking care of Grandma, excelling at your job. I didn't want to be another burden. So instead you let me believe you were taking credit for my money? You let me think you were deliberately stealing my recognition? It wasn't like that, my mother interjected. We didn't want to worry you with the severity of Michael's condition. And yes, it helped his self-esteem to be seen as the provider, to still have that role in the family. What's the harm in that? You've always been strong, Ashley. You don't need the validation like Michael does. The familiar refrain hit differently now, tinged with new understanding, but no less hurtful. You still should have told me the truth, I said. Instead, you've been lying to me for years, making me feel invisible, unappreciated. "We were protecting you," my mother insisted. "No, you were protecting yourselves from having to acknowledge that your daughter is the one holding this family together financially. You were protecting your outdated belief that it should be the son, not the daughter, taking care of things." Aunt Barbara stepped forward, her face flushed with indignation. "Now you're just being ridiculous, Ashley. This has nothing to do with you being a woman. It's about Michael's needs being greater than yours. My needs matter too," I finally shouted, the calm I had maintained cracking open to reveal the raw hurt beneath. "I have spent my entire life being overlooked in this family. My achievements ignored, my contributions erased. And now I find out it's because you all decided I was strong enough to handle being treated like I don't matter." Tears were streaming down my face now, years of suppressed pain finding release. Family members shifted uncomfortably, some edging toward the exit to escape the emotional display. "I have bent over backward trying to earn your approval, your recognition, your love. I have given and given and given, and it's never enough. Well, I'm done. I'll never be involved with this again." I turned and walked out, leaving the ledger open on the table. Leaving my half-eaten pie, leaving the stunned silence of my family behind me. In my room, I threw my belongings into my overnight bag with shaking hands. The lovely summer weekend I had anticipated had turned into yet another painful reminder that in my family, I would always be secondary, always the support but never the supported. As I carried my bag downstairs, Jessica met me at the bottom step. "You're leaving." "I can't stay here," I said, my voice hoarse from crying. "Not after this." "I understand," she said, giving me a quick hug. "Call me when you get home safely, okay?" Grandma Eleanor appeared from the living room, her face lined with concern. "Ashley, please don't leave like this." "I'm sorry, Grandma, but I need to go." "Take your pie at least," she said, holding out a container. "It's too good to leave behind." The small gesture of acknowledgement nearly undid me again. I took the container with a nod of thanks, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. No one else came to see me off. As I placed my bag in the trunk of my car, I caught sight of the family through the dining room window, already regrouping, already closing ranks. Michael was at the center, my mother's arm around his shoulders protectively. I got into my car and drove away from Grandma Eleanor's estate, away from the family that had never truly seen me, and toward an uncertain future where, for the first time, I would put myself first. The drive back to Boston was a blur of tears and swirling thoughts. Rain began to fall as I crossed the state line into Massachusetts, matching my mood perfectly. Traffic was mercifully light on the Sunday evening, allowing me to make good time despite my emotional state. As I drove, memories surfaced unbidden. Moments from throughout my life when the pattern had been clear, but I had refused to see it. My 10th birthday. When my parents had forgotten to buy a cake because they were focused on Michael's upcoming baseball tournament. My high school graduation party. Hastily arranged the day before because my mother had been too busy planning Michael's summer activities to think about celebrating my achievement. My father's funeral, where my mother had leaned on Michael throughout the service while I stood alone, managing the arrangements I had made and paid for. The common thread through all these memories was my desperate desire for approval, for acknowledgement, for love. I had been trying to earn my place in the family through achievement, through financial support, through unfailing reliability. And it had never been enough. By the time I reached my brownstone in Boston's Back Bay neighborhood, exhaustion had settled deep in my bones. I dragged myself and my overnight bag inside, dropping both in the entryway. The house felt emptier than usual, the silence more pronounced. I wandered through the rooms I had so carefully decorated, each item chosen with precision and care. The antique writing desk I had found at an estate sale and refinished myself. The plush sofa that had cost 2 months' worth of savings but was perfect for curling up with a book on rainy afternoons. The wall of framed degrees and professional certifications that no one in my family had ever seen because none of them had visited my home. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "Did you make it home okay?" I replied with a simple yes and turned off my phone, unable to handle any more communication, even from the one family member who seemed to see me. Sleep evaded me that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the revelation about Michael's condition and trying to reconcile it with the years of feeling invisible. Yes, his needs had been greater than mine in some ways. Yes, a traumatic brain injury was serious and life-altering. But did that justify the complete erasure of my contributions? Did that make it okay to let me believe a lie about where my money was going and who was getting credit for it? The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. My boss, concerned by the uncharacteristic absence, asked if everything was all right. Family emergency, I said, the half-truth sticking in my throat. I just need a day to sort some things out. Take 2, she replied, her voice kind. The Henderson portfolio review can wait until Wednesday. The unexpected understanding brought fresh tears to my eyes. My boss of 4 years had shown more concern for my well-being in a 30-second phone call than my mother had in 32 years of life. Around noon, my phone rang. Jessica's name flashed on the screen, and I answered despite my reluctance to revisit the previous day's events. "How are you holding up?" she asked without preamble. "I've been better," I admitted, curled up on my sofa with a cup of tea gone cold beside me. "How bad is the fallout?" "Well, Aunt Deborah is acting like you've committed some terrible betrayal by leaving. Michael seems genuinely upset, though I can't tell if it's because he feels guilty or because he lost his financial safety net. Grandma Eleanor is the only one openly saying that they should have been honest with you from the beginning." "At least someone is on my side," I said, a fresh wave of hurt washing over me. "Has my mother said anything about what happens now? With the money, I mean." Jessica hesitated. She mentioned something about Michael looking into disability benefits again. "I think she's assuming the monthly transfers will continue despite everything." The audacity was breathtaking. "She still expects me to send money? After all this?" "You know Aunt Deborah. In her mind, family obligations trump everything else, including how she treats you." I laughed, a hollow sound devoid of humor. That's rich coming from her. Where was her sense of family obligation when it came to acknowledging my contributions, to treating me with basic respect? "I don't disagree," Jessica said carefully. "But I should tell you something else. I talked more with Michael after you left. His condition is pretty serious, Ashley. The cognitive effects of the TBI impact his memory, his processing speed, his ability to handle complex tasks. That's why he hasn't been able to hold down a job. The treatments are helping, but progress is slow." I closed my eyes, conflicting emotions warring within me. Compassion for my brother's struggle. Anger at the deception. Hurt at being deemed strong enough to handle being erased. "I understand he's dealing with serious issues, Jess. But that doesn't excuse lying to me for years. They could have told me the truth about his condition without taking credit for my financial support." "I know," she agreed. "For what it's worth. I think Grandma Eleanor is reading them the riot act as we speak. She was livid after you left." The thought of my 85-year-old grandmother taking my mother and brother to task brought a small smile to my face. Eleanor Walker had always been a force to be reckoned with, even in her advanced years. After hanging up with Jessica, I made an appointment with my therapist, Dr. Rachel Green. I had started seeing her after my father's death, working through my grief and the complicated emotions that came with losing a parent with whom I'd had an unresolved relationship. We had scaled back to monthly sessions in recent years, but this situation clearly warranted urgent attention. 2 days later, I sat in Dr. Green's office, recounting the events of the family reunion. She listened attentively, her expression thoughtful as I detailed the name tag incident, the financial deception, and the revelation about Michael's condition. "It sounds like there are multiple layers to process here," she said when I finished. "The long-standing pattern of feeling overlooked in your family, the shock of discovering your brother's more serious medical condition, the betrayal of having your financial contributions misattributed, and now, the decision about how to move forward." "That's exactly it," I said, grateful for her ability to distill the complex situation into manageable components. Part of me wants to cut off the financial support entirely as a way of standing up for myself. But another part feels guilty about withdrawing help that Michael genuinely needs, even if they've been dishonest about it. Those are both valid reactions, Dr. Green assured me. What might help is separating your relationship with your family from your desire to support your brother's medical care. There may be ways to maintain the latter without enabling the dynamics that have hurt you. We spent the remainder of the session exploring options. From redirecting my financial support through official channels rather than my mother's account, to establishing clearer boundaries around recognition and respect, to taking a temporary step back while I processed my feelings. As I left Dr. Green's office, I felt marginally better, equipped with strategies to consider rather than drowning in emotional reactivity. But the path forward remained uncertain, complicated by decades of family dynamics that couldn't be resolved in a single explosive confrontation. That evening, as I was preparing dinner, my doorbell rang unexpectedly. When I opened it, I found Samantha Chin standing on my doorstep, an old friend from college who had warned me years ago about my family's treatment of me. We had drifted apart after a disagreement where I had defended my family against her observations, unwilling to admit the truth even to myself. "Jessica called me," she explained, looking uncertain about her welcome. "She thought you might need a friend who understands complicated family stuff." The gesture, from both Jessica and Samantha, broke through the isolation I had been feeling. I stepped aside to let her in, and over takeout Thai food and a bottle of wine, I reconnected with a friend who had seen the truth about my family long before I was ready to acknowledge it. "I'm sorry I didn't listen to you back then," I told her as we sat on my sofa, empty containers scattered on the coffee table between us. "You weren't ready," she said simply. "We rarely are when it comes to seeing our families clearly. It took me years of therapy to understand my own parents' limitations." "So, what do I do now?" I asked, the question that had been circling in my mind for days. "You set boundaries," she said, her tone gentle but firm. "You decide what you're willing to give and under what conditions. You stop trying to earn love that should be freely given. And you build a life filled with people who see you and value you for exactly who you are." It sounded both impossible and essential. A mountain I had no choice but to climb if I wanted to break free from the patterns that had defined my family relationships for so long. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into work, finding solace in the ordered world of financial planning where effort yielded predictable results and recognition was tied directly to performance. My team at Boston Financial Advisors had just secured a major new client, bringing $5 million in assets under our management. And the success provided a welcome distraction from my personal turmoil. My phone showed dozens of missed calls from my mother, but only 2 voicemails, both brief and focused on practicalities rather than the emotional fallout of our confrontation. "Ashley, it's Mom. The mortgage payment is due next week, and I'm not sure if you'll be handling that as usual. Please call me back. Ashley, this is ridiculous. Michael has a doctor's appointment on Thursday, and we need to know if you're covering it or if we should cancel. You can't just cut us off without warning." There was no acknowledgement of my feelings, no apology for the years of deception, just an entitled expectation that the money would continue to flow regardless of how I was treated. I deleted the messages without returning the calls. Jessica kept me updated on family developments through regular texts, letting me know that Grandma Eleanor had set up her own checking account for the first time in 20 years, refusing to have her finances managed by my mother any longer. The small act of independence from my 85-year-old grandmother inspired me more than she could know. 3 weeks after the disastrous reunion, I met with my financial advisor, ironically seeking advice despite being in the industry myself. Sometimes, emotional entanglement made it impossible to see one's own situation clearly. "I want to redirect the money I've been giving my family," I explained to Marcus, a seasoned advisor in his 50s with whom I'd worked since starting at the firm. "I still want to support my brother's medical care, but I don't want the funds going through my mother anymore." Marcus nodded, unsurprised by the request. We had discussed my family financial obligations in previous meetings, though I had never shared the full emotional context until now. "There are several options," he said, pulling up my financial profile on his computer. "We could set up a direct payment to the medical providers, establish a special needs trust if his condition is long-term. or create a dedicated health savings account that he can access for qualified expenses. We spent an hour exploring the possibilities, weighing the tax implications and the level of control each option would provide. In the end, we decided on a combination approach, with direct payments to the neuropsychologist and rehabilitation center and a monitored health savings account for medications and incidental medical expenses. This way, your support goes directly to Michael's care, not through your mother's account, Marcus explained. And there's transparency about where the money is coming from and how it's being used. It felt empowering to take control of my financial contributions to ensure they would be used as intended and properly attributed. But as the end of the month approached, the usual time for my $3,000 transfer, I found myself hesitating, wondering if there was a better use for at least some of that money. The answer came unexpectedly during a lunch meeting with a client, Diane Harper, the director of a local educational foundation. As she described their scholarship program for first-generation college students, something resonated deeply within me. Many of these kids have all the potential in the world, Diane explained, but they're fighting against family dynamics that don't value or understand higher education. Some of their parents actively discourage them from applying to college, seeing it as a rejection of family values or traditions. The parallel to my own experience was striking. While my family hadn't discouraged my education, they had consistently undervalued my achievements and contributions, creating a dynamic where my success somehow threatened the established order rather than being celebrated. How much does a scholarship typically cover? I asked, an idea taking shape. Our full scholarships are $20,000 per year for 4 years, Diane said. But we also offer partial scholarships starting at $5,000 annually. Every bit helps these students feel validated in their choices. By the time the lunch ended, I had committed to funding a partial scholarship of $7,500 annually, pledging half of the money I had been sending home each month to support a student whose family didn't recognize their potential. The remaining $1,500 would still go to Michael's medical care, but through the new channels Marcus and I had established. It felt like the right balance, maintaining support for my brother while redirecting some of my resources toward a cause that spoke to my own experience. 2 days before the end of the month, my phone rang with Michael's number. I almost didn't answer, still raw from the confrontation and subsequent silence, but curiosity won out. Ashley? It's Michael. His voice sounded smaller than I remembered, hesitant in a way that was unfamiliar. Do you have a minute to talk? I'm listening, I said, neither warm nor cold, waiting to see where this would lead. I wanted to tell you that I'm sorry, he began. I never should have gone along with Mom's plan to take credit for your money. It was wrong, and I knew it was wrong. But it was easier than admitting how much I was struggling. The apology surprised me, both in its directness and its timing. What brought this on now? I asked, suspicious of the convenient timing just before the monthly transfer was due. Mom doesn't know I'm calling, he said, as if reading my thoughts. Actually, she'd be pretty upset if she knew. But Grandma Eleanor came to see me yesterday and showed me some of your accomplishments that I never knew about. Your graduation from Princeton. Your professional certifications. Articles you've been quoted in about financial planning. He paused. She made me see how unfair it's been, how Mom and I have been taking you for granted. I remained silent, processing his words, looking for the manipulation, but finding what seemed like genuine remorse. The truth is, Ashley, I've been jealous of you for years, he continued when I didn't respond. You've always been so capable, so put together. Even after Dad died, you just kept moving forward, building your career, taking care of everyone. Meanwhile, I couldn't even hold down a job at the hardware store after my accident. You could have told me about the TBI, I said, the hurt still evident in my voice. I would have understood. I would have helped anyway. I know that now, he said. But at the time, it felt like one more way I was failing while you were succeeding. And Mom kept saying you didn't need to know the details, that it would just worry you unnecessarily. That wasn't her decision to make, I said firmly. Or yours. I deserve the truth. You're right, he agreed, and the simple acknowledgement felt like the first honest exchange we'd had in years. I'm not calling to ask for anything, Ashley. I just wanted you to know that I see what we did wrong, and I'm sorry for my part in it. After hanging up, I sat with the conversation, turning it over in my mind, looking for hidden agendas or manipulation, but finding none. Michael's apologies seemed genuine, a rare moment of clarity and accountability in a family system built on denial and deflection. The next day, I wrote a letter to my family, explaining my decision to redirect my financial support. I detailed the new arrangements for Michael's medical care, ensuring they understood that while the method was changing, my commitment to his health remained. I also shared my decision to fund a scholarship, without explicitly connecting it to my own experience of being undervalued. The letter was factual rather than emotional, focusing on the practical changes rather than rehashing the hurt that had led to them. I ended with a request for space to process my feelings about our relationship, making it clear that while I was setting new boundaries, I wasn't cutting them off entirely. After sending the letter via certified mail to ensure it wouldn't be lost or ignored, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time in my adult life, I had taken concrete action to break the pattern of giving without receiving even basic acknowledgement in return. As the holiday season approached, traditionally a time of obligatory family gatherings and heightened expectations, I made different plans. I booked a trip to a beachfront resort in Florida for Thanksgiving weekend, my first solo vacation in years. For Christmas, I accepted an invitation from Samantha to join her family celebration, a gesture that brought tears to my eyes when she extended it. "You don't have to be alone just because you're setting boundaries with your family," she told me. "My parents already adore you from all the stories I've told them, and they're excited to have you join us." The prospect of a holiday centered on genuine warmth, rather than performative family obligation, was both foreign and deeply appealing. As I marked the dates on my calendar, I realized I was looking forward to the season for the first time in years. The end of the month arrived, the date when my automatic transfer would normally deliver $3,000 to my mother's account. Instead, the money flowed in new directions. $1,500 to the medical providers directly supporting Michael's recovery, $750 to the First Generation Scholarship Fund at Diane's Foundation, and $750 to a separate savings account I had established for my own future, a small but significant act of self-care after years of prioritizing everyone else's needs. I was reviewing the confirmation emails for these transactions when my doorbell rang unexpectedly. When I opened the door, Grandma Eleanor stood on my doorstep, a small suitcase beside her and a determined expression on her lined face. "Grandma, what are you doing here?" I asked, stunned to see my 85-year-old grandmother, who rarely traveled beyond her local grocery store. "I took a taxi from the train station," she announced, as if that explained everything. "Are you going to invite me in, or shall we continue this conversation on your doorstep?" I stepped aside, still processing the surprise visit. "Of course, come in. How did you get from Connecticut to Boston by yourself?" "I'm old, Ashley, not incompetent," she said with a sniff as she entered my home. "I've been letting your mother manage my affairs for far too long. It's time I started making my own decisions again." She looked around approvingly. "This is a lovely home. You've done well for yourself." "Thank you," I said, still confused by her presence, but moved by the first family member to actually see my home. "Can I get you something to drink? Tea, water, wine?" "Tea would be lovely. And then we need to talk." While I prepared the tea, Grandma Eleanor made herself comfortable in my living room, examining the framed photographs and artwork on my walls with genuine interest. When I returned with a tray holding a teapot, cups, and a plate of cookies I'd fortunately baked the previous weekend, she patted the sofa beside her. "Sit down, dear. I've brought something to show you." From her large handbag, she extracted a leather-bound photo album I had never seen before. Unlike the one in her study that documented Michael's achievements, this one had a simple cover with no label. "I've been keeping this for years," she explained, opening it carefully. "Your mother doesn't know about it." Inside were photographs of me, dozens of them, documenting moments throughout my life that I thought had gone unnoticed. My debate team victories, My college acceptance letter. My first day at the financial firm. My brownstone on the day I closed on it. Each photo was carefully labeled in Grandma Eleanor's elegant handwriting, with dates and brief descriptions. "I don't understand," I said, turning the pages with trembling hands. "You kept all of these?" "Of course I did," she said simply. "I've always been proud of you, Ashley. I just didn't stand up to your mother the way I should have. I let her control the family narrative because it was easier than fighting her. That was my mistake, and I'm here to apologize for it." Tears welled in my eyes as I continued through the album, seeing my life validated in these carefully preserved images. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" When Mom and Michael were taking credit for my money, when I was being pushed to the side at family events, Grandma Eleanor sighed deeply, her weathered hands folding in her lap. "When your grandfather died, your mother stepped in to handle my finances, my household, everything. I was grieving and grateful for the help, and gradually, that arrangement became the norm. By the time I realized how controlling she had become, how she was treating you versus Michael, I felt too dependent on her to speak up." She reached for my hand. "It was cowardly of me, and I'm deeply sorry." "You're here now," I said, squeezing her hand. "That counts for something." "I'm here because it's time for some honest conversation about our family," she said firmly. "I've spent the last month thinking about the patterns we've all been trapped in. Did you know that your mother was treated the same way by her father? He favored her brother, your Uncle Paul, in everything. The pattern repeats because we don't confront it." The revelation about my mother's childhood cast her behavior in a new light, not excusing it, but providing context I had never considered. "So she's doing to me what was done to her?" "Exactly. And she's blind to it because acknowledging it would mean confronting her own pain." Grandma Eleanor shook her head sadly. "That doesn't make it right. But it might help you understand that it was never really about you, dear. It was about wounds that were inflicted long before you were born." We talked for hours. Grandma Eleanor sharing family history I had never known, connecting dots between generations of dysfunction that had culminated in my experience of invisibility. By the time we ordered takeout for dinner, I felt a new understanding of my family system, even as I remained committed to changing my role within it. Grandma Eleanor stayed for 3 days, her longest trip away from home in decades. We toured Boston together, visited museums, and talked more openly than we ever had before. When it was time for her to return to Connecticut, I drove her myself, though I declined to stay for dinner with my mother and Michael. "Baby steps," Grandma Eleanor counseled as I dropped her off. "Healing happens gradually, not all at once." In the months that followed, I maintained my new financial arrangements, directly supporting Michael's care while funding the scholarship program. Diane introduced me to Teresa Martinez, the first recipient of what we now called the Walker First Generation Scholarship. The 19-year-old aspiring accountant reminded me of myself at that age, brilliant and determined, but fighting against family expectations that limited her horizon. "My parents think college is a waste of time," she told me when we met for coffee. "They want me to work in the family restaurant and eventually take it over. They don't understand why I want more." "What would make them understand?" I asked, genuinely curious about her perspective. Teresa considered the question carefully. "I think they're afraid that education will take me away from them, that I'll become someone they don't recognize or relate to. If they could see that I can be successful while still honoring my roots, maybe they'd support my choices more." Her insight made me wonder if similar fears had driven my mother's behavior. Perhaps my success had felt like a rejection of the family system rather than an achievement to be celebrated. It didn't excuse the deception or the years of feeling invisible, but it offered a perspective I hadn't considered before. 6 months after the family reunion confrontation, I received an unexpected call from my mother. "We need to talk," she said without preamble. "Can you come to dinner next Sunday?" "I'm not sure that's a good idea yet," I replied cautiously. "Michael and I have been seeing a family therapist," she continued, surprising me. "It was his idea, actually. We've been working through some issues, and the therapist thinks it would be beneficial if you joined us for a session." The admission that they were in therapy was shocking enough, but the invitation to join them was unprecedented. After consulting with Dr. Green, I agreed to attend one session, with the understanding that I could leave at any time if it became too difficult. The following week, I found myself sitting in a comfortable office with my mother, Michael, and Dr. Sanders, a gentle-voiced woman in her 60s who specialized in family systems therapy. The session was tense at first, with my mother clearly uncomfortable with the vulnerability required. "Deborah, why don't you share what you've been working on regarding Ashley?" Dr. Sanders prompted after initial introductions. My mother shifted in her seat, avoiding eye contact. "I've been thinking about how I have treated Ashley over the years." The admission seemed physically painful for her. Dr. Sanders has helped me see that I've been repeating patterns from my own childhood, favoring Michael the way my father favored my brother. "And how do you feel about that realization?" Dr. Sanders asked. Ashamed, my mother admitted, the word barely audible, and afraid that it's too late to change anything. The session continued with Michael sharing his own revelations about his role in the family dynamic, how he had accepted preferential treatment because it soothed his insecurities, especially after his accident. When it was my turn to speak, I shared honestly about the hurt of being erased, of having my contributions attributed to Michael, of never feeling fully seen or valued. "What would healing look like for you, Ashley?" Dr. Sanders asked as the session neared its end. I considered the question carefully. Acknowledgement of what happened, respect for my boundaries going forward, and a willingness to create a new type of relationship based on honesty rather than pretending the past didn't happen. It wasn't a magical solution, and one therapy session couldn't undo decades of dysfunctional patterns. But it was a start, a small opening toward a different kind of family connection. The weeks that followed brought small changes. My mother began sending brief texts acknowledging my professional achievements when she saw them mentioned in local business publications. Michael called occasionally, our conversations slightly awkward but increasingly genuine. Grandma Eleanor provided updates on her newfound independence, proudly reporting that she had opened her own investment account with a local advisor I had recommended. When Christmas arrived, I honored my commitment to spend the holiday with Samantha's family, whose warmth and genuine interest in each other's lives provided a stark contrast to my own family's dynamics. But on Christmas Eve, I received a group text from my mother, Michael, and Grandma Eleanor, each expressing simple wishes for my happiness and including a photo of them placing a present under the tree with my name on it. "No pressure to open it now," Michael added. "It will be here when you're ready." The gesture, small but meaningful, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Not because it fixed everything, not because it erased the hurt of the past, but because it represented their first acknowledgement that relationships required rebuilding rather than pretending nothing had happened. As the new year began, I found myself reflecting on the journey of the past 6 months. The painful confrontation at the family reunion had been a breaking point, but also a breakthrough, forcing issues into the open that had festered beneath the surface for decades. While my relationship with my mother remained complicated and likely always would, I had found a new footing. A way to engage on my terms rather than desperately seeking approval that was perpetually withheld. More importantly, I had built connections outside my family of origin, creating a chosen family of friends and colleagues who valued me for exactly who I was. The monthly redirect of funds from my mother's account to Michael's medical providers and the scholarship fund represented more than a financial change. It was a reclaiming of my narrative, my contribution, my voice. On New Year's Eve, I hosted a small dinner party in my brownstone. Samantha came with her new boyfriend. Jessica drove in from Connecticut. Teresa stopped by briefly to share excitement about her upcoming semester. And to my surprise, Grandma Eleanor arrived with a bottle of champagne and a determination to ring in the year with people who appreciate my granddaughter. As we raised our glasses at midnight, I looked around at the eclectic gathering, this patchwork family I had created alongside the complicated one I was born into. There was still healing to be done, boundaries to be maintained, old patterns to resist. But for the first time in my life, I felt truly seen, not just for what I could provide or achieve, but for who I was at my core. to finding our worth within ourselves. I toasted, and to surrounding ourselves with people who reflect it back to us. The glasses clinked, the champagne sparkled. And I stepped into the new year with a hard-won understanding that while we cannot choose our families of origin, we can choose how we engage with them, how we heal from their limitations, and how we create connections that nurture rather than diminish our spirits. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members who took you for granted? How did you handle the situation? Share your experience in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they deserve to be valued. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes the most loving thing you can do for both yourself and others is to stand firm in your truth.